Hello everyone. Today I wanted to share my favorite leveling build for the Elder Scrolls Online. But before we dive headfirst into the what and the how, let me give an overview of what I like to call the Bloody Brawler. I designed this build around being able to solo as much PvE content as possible. And to do that, I mixed survivability with damage over time effects. The biggest pro about this build is that with a few skill swaps you can be ready to take on a boss or jump into a group. So full disclosure, I'm not recording this in time with the video. I find it a little easier to give technical details while I'm not playing the game. I'm guessing the title gave it away, but we will be using a Dragonknight. To start off though, let's talk champion points. While none of them are a must, Precise Strikes, perk for 12% weapon critical after spending 30 points in the Ritual Sign, is very helpful, as well as the Blade Expert and the Atronach sign to pick up some extra damage. For attributes, you want to spend them mostly all in stamina, but about 1/3 into health. For skills, we focus on a two-handed bar and a dual-wield bar. I call the dual-wield bar my survivability bar. You start with Blood Craze for a life leech, Rapid Strikes, just to straight up damage, Hardened Armor to further reduce damage, Green Dragon Blood as a straight up heal, and either Degeneration for more lifesteal, or Volcano Rune for a mass stun, which you use to buy time to heal in tough multi-enemy fights. The ultimate for this bar should be Corrosive Armor, as it caps damage intake and puts damage back out. Now the two-handed bar is all about engaging, applying more dots, and finishing off the opponent. We start with either Brawler to apply a bleed and proc a shield, or Critical Rush to engage with. Using one over the other is all situational. There's no real definitely this one or definitely that one kind of situation with that. The second skill should be Executioner as a heavy hitting death blow, as it starts to do about 300% extra damage once they get around to 1/3 of their health. Your third skill should be the stamina morph of Fiery Breath called Burning Breath, which is it applies a dot to enemies in a cone based on your stamina damage. Use Rally for raw damage and healing over time, and as soon as the skill ends you get even more healing. Your fifth skill should be either Unstable Flame for the extra dot on tougher enemies with more health, or Volcano Rune, again as a mass stun to allow you time to heal in a pinch. The ultimate for this bar should be Shooting Star, so it just does massive damage and it's a ground-based dot, so if you can get them to stand on that while you've applied your dots, you're just doing crazy damage every tick. Used properly, this build will allow you to survive and solo almost all content while leveling, including the world bosses. Obviously you can't solo dungeons, that's a little more difficult, but with this I was focused mostly on soloing everything in a zone as I was moving through it. For armor, I recommend 5 heavy pieces with 2 medium, using health and stamina enchants, leaning more towards health. If you join a dungeon, it can be useful to keep a medium set to DPS with, but it's not at all a necessity. You can still do just fine without it. Any melee focused set bonuses on your armor with health or critical rating are great. This build though, due to the life leech and all the damage mitigation, is very forgiving, especially to newer players. And the upside is you can still put out enough damage with all of the dots to keep up in the in-game content and run all those veteran dungeons and things. This is hardly a min-max build in any shape or form, but it's really fun to play and it's not at all difficult to use. So now I want to run through these skills and how to use them in conjunction with each other to effectively clear enemies as quickly as possible. When engaging one enemy, it's best to charge in, apply the Burning Breath dot, which will reduce their physical resistance, and then they should be down enough health to almost immediately just start spamming Executioner. And then after a few hits with Executioner, they'll pretty much just be dead. When engaging multiple enemies, you want to open up with Volcano Rune, Critical Rush in, apply the Burning Breath dot, and then again just start spamming Executioner, and they should be dead fairly quickly. This is also a great time that if your Shooting Star ultimate is up, you definitely want to drop it on their heads on top of the other dot. What I would argue the best thing about this build is that once you have these basic concepts down and the heavy armor to reduce the damage, there's not a whole lot else to it. The rest of it's all variables that you can certainly compound upon as far as passive effects go, and you can definitely increase the effectiveness of the build, but none of it is hinging upon any of that. What I've shown you are the basics that absolutely need to be done in order for this to work, which as you can see are fairly marginal. It just doesn't take a lot of work to get this moving, and it's incredibly versatile in the sense that if I join a dungeon group, I can just switch to a medium set to max out my damage even more, or I can just stay in the heavy armor, switch to my two-handed weapon, switch Critical Rush out for Brawler, switch Volcano Rune out for Unstable Flame, and then at that point I can just use Brawler to spam a bleed, apply Burning Breath, and then I can hit each of them individually with Unstable Flame. And then if Shooting Star is up, drop that on their head, and then even as a melee Dragonknight you can do a pretty effective amount of AoE damage, though admittedly nowhere near combos designed specifically for AoE, but still a respectable enough amount to get you by. Personally, for group dungeons, I like to switch to the medium set because if you're not tanking, there's really no reason to have the heavy armor on in a group dungeon setting. So for that reason, I switched to the medium armor so I can get a bit more melee damage off. There's just a lot of ways to switch around one or two things with this build and then completely change the effectiveness of it. For instance, you can use Fossilize, which is a crowd control ability the Dragonknight has, to lock one stronger enemy down while you burn his smaller minions down, and then engage him with your dual-wield survivability bar, and take next to no damage from the entire group of enemies. And that's really what this build is all about, is just minimizing the damage you take as a melee DPS dealer.